The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 17265 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on changes to the business programme. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press their request to speak button now, and I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion. Therefore, the question is that motion 17265 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. Our next item of business is a motion of condolence in the name of the First Minister, and on behalf of all members and staff of the Scottish Parliament, I expend my deepest sympathy to the Roman Catholic community in Scotland and worldwide on the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis. We will remember his compassion and humanity, which have been at the very heart of the many tributes to him, and as a mark of our respect, our flags fly at half-mast today. And I am honoured to welcome to the gallery today Monsignor Jeremy Milne, the Vicar-General for the Archdiocese of St Andrews and Edinburgh, the Right Reverend Shaw Patterson, Moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, Rabbi Moshe Rubin, Senior Rabbi in Scotland, and Imam Fakr Aftab of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Scotland. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on behalf of the people of Scotland, I express my sadness at the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday. His loss will be felt most acutely within the Roman Catholic community here in Scotland and abroad, but his loss will be mourned by countless others who admired, respected and were inspired by the humble, kind, empathetic spiritual leadership that he gave to the world. Pope Francis brought simplicity and humility to the papacy, a gentle spirit who preferred to receive people informally and always with grace. In deeds and in words, he took forward his leadership of the Catholic Church in a manner that was thoughtful, measured and conciliatory. His Holiness's belief in the goodness of people was as unshakable as his devotion to the Church, and his papacy was defined by the message of Jesus Christ of love your neighbour as yourself. As the first Pope from Latin America, he sought to build new bridges between nations and faiths. He spoke warmly to advocate for greater inclusivity, both within the Church and throughout society. Pope Francis spoke loudly in calling for peace and human dignity around the world. In his final public address, held this Easter Sunday at the Vatican, he used these words: "What a great thirst for death, for killing we witness each day in the many conflicts raging in different parts of the world. I would like all of us to hope anew and to revive our trust in others, including those who are different than ourselves." He was a man who was always on the side of the poor and the migrant. He was always on the side of those who faced injustice. He had a thirst to use the power of Christian teaching to advocate for those who required a message of justice and the protection of the message of justice. And he regularly called for an end to bigotry and conflict. Above all, Pope Francis worked to bring people together across what often seemed like insurmountable divides. His Holiness was particularly outspoken about the trauma experienced recently by the people of Ukraine and Gaza, while equally condemning the growing climate of anti-Semitism throughout the world. In 2014, at a prayer meeting held at the Vatican, Pope Francis urged the then Israeli President Shimon Peres and his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas to be courageous in the pursuit of peace in the Middle East. And despite the weight of his office, and often when he was in poor health, the Pope built friendships and connections to try to bring people together. In recent years, his faithfulness in keeping contact with Christians in Gaza illustrates the devotion of his leadership to all congregations, especially those who were suffering. Presiding Officer, I express my own gratitude for Pope Francis's lifetime of faithful devotion and dedicated public service. He was always on the side of the poor and those who faced injustice, and he used his position of leadership to work for a better world. That leadership has been a powerful example to me and to millions across the globe. We are profoundly grateful for his life and his example as a principled spiritual leadership in our world today. So, in drawing my remarks to a close, Presiding Officer, I wish to conclude with some words from Pope Francis' final address on Sunday. There can be no peace without freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of expression and respect for the views of others. The light of Easter impels us to break down the barriers that create division and are fraught with grave political and economic consequences. It impels us to care for one another, to increase our mutual solidarity and to work for the integral development of each human person. There could be no finer words to have left the world with, and the challenges and the difficulties that we face as a society today, than the words that Pope Francis left us with on Easter Sunday. It is a mark of the power of his spiritual leadership, and it is an example that we would be well advised to follow. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. I now call on Annie Wells.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the world mourns His Holiness Pope Francis, I am honoured to have the opportunity to pay tribute to him here today. Pope Francis was a champion of compassion within the Church. He was elected to the papacy at a time of huge challenges and controversy for the Catholic faith. But ultimately, his time was marked not by those difficulties, but by the true love of humanity, with all its flaws and strengths which he brought to his office. He stood for the downtrodden, the vulnerable, the poor, and all those who, for a long time, weren't sure whether they were really welcome in church. His accepting, generous spirit reached out to Catholics like me around the world. His famous words, "Who am I to judge?" Those words marked the start of a shift in how the Catholic Church approached homosexuality, but they also perfectly capture Pope Francis's humility and compassion for others. And as a gay woman, that message meant so much to me, and I know many others. But Pope Francis was not just a champion for those of Catholic faith. His message was one of acceptance and solidarity between people of all different faiths. And right up until the final days of his life, he was preaching this message of acceptance and peace, praying for an end to conflicts around the globe, and his Easter blessing on Sunday, just the day before his death. Though he was not able to deliver his full blessing himself, he still appeared in Rome to wish us all a happy Easter just 2 days ago, showing astounding dedication to public service even when gravely ill. He demonstrated how all of us can continue to make a difference right until the end, and he left us with these words: "May the principle of humanity never fail to be the hallmark of our daily actions, reminding us of the value of every human life and the importance of loving your neighbour." Pope Francis was a pope who reached out to people across the world, who gave the Church a human face and personal touch, and who focused on humanity as well as divinity. His passing will be mourned for a long time by those of many different faiths, but his legacy can be celebrated as one of compassion and peace.
Thank you. I now call on Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party, I put on record our deep sorrow on the death of His Holiness Pope Francis. The death of the Holy Father will come as a source of mourning and reflection for Catholics in Scotland and around the world, but coming as it did on Easter Monday, the day when Christians reflect Christ's conquering of death, it will, I'm sure, have been a source of solace in what is a trying time. And while Pope Francis was, of course, loved by Catholics worldwide, he was also deeply respected and loved by people of all faiths and none. And I saw that when I attended Mass at St Andrew's Metropolitan Cathedral in Glasgow yesterday. Pope Francis was not only a remarkable pope and shepherd of his flock, he was a remarkable man. From his humble origins in Buenos Aires to the seat of St Peter in Rome, His Holiness never lost sight of what drove him or lost touch with the feelings and realities facing the people he served. Because throughout his ministry, Pope Francis dedicated himself to the corporal works of mercy, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, clothing the naked, sheltering the homeless, visiting the sick, visiting the imprisoned, and burying the dead. In the midst of war and depression in his native Latin America, Pope Francis was a voice for peace and reconciliation. He called again and again for peace in Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, phoning the parish priest in besieged Gaza every single day until the end. As Pope, he threw himself at the feet of warring leaders in South Sudan to beg for peace. He literally washed the feet of prisoners and those whose society had shunned, and only last week washing the feet of inmates in one of Rome's largest prisons. And he was a constant voice for social justice in our world, standing up for the right of workers, demanding action on the climate crisis, and giving voice to the plight of refugees and the dispossessed worldwide. Pope Francis used his final public address to call once again for peace across our world. He called for a ceasefire in Palestine, the release of hostages, and dialogue towards peace, calling out all forms of prejudice and hate, using his final hours to call for justice and peace, yes, in the Middle East, but also beyond. All of Francis's actions were driven by his deep Catholic faith, his personal devotion to Our Lady, and his spiritual connection with the great peacemaker and ecologist St. Francis of Assisi. He was, in short, a humble labourer in the vineyard of the Lord, a man who spoke to all faiths and none, who broke down barriers and broke bread with all, who opened his heart to the world, and who dedicated his life to making our world a better place. We can unite in our deep hope that he now hears the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." In these dark and at times violent times, it's worth reflecting on how much better and safer our world would be if we all strive to live a little more like Pope Francis. On behalf of the Scottish Labour Party, I put on record our prayers and our condolences on the passing of the Holy Father. Eternal rest grant unto him, requiescat in pace.
Thank you. I now call on Lawrence Slater.
My condolences, and those of the Scottish Green Party, to the Catholic community in Scotland and around the world today, following the passing of Pope Francis. The first non-European pope in more than 1,000 years, he was known for his determination to be a voice for the poor. In particular, he recognised climate change as a global problem with significant consequences, and he recognised the harms of the developed world's addiction to consumption. Pope Francis called the world to join the fight against climate change, writing in a papal encyclical letter that the science of climate change is clear, and that the Catholic Church views climate change as a moral issue that must be addressed in order to protect the earth and everyone on it. He was a committed supporter of Palestine and publicly condemned Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Pope Francis called for a ceasefire in Gaza. He urged for humanitarian aid to be allowed into Gaza and for all captives to be freed. He emphasized that war is always a defeat. Every war is a defeat, and begged for the violence to stop. He often took an inclusive stance in the face of intolerance and prejudice. While he never actually changed institutional or doctrinal opposition to issues of LGBTQ+ equality, women's rights, or reproductive choice, he did make bold steps to move the Church into a more inclusive direction, allowing informal blessings of same-sex unions and broadening the role of women. I recognise the sadness that will be felt around the world at his passing, and I hope that Pope Francis' dream of a more peaceful and just world may yet come to be.
Thank you. I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to express on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats our profound sympathy and our sorrow at the passing of the Holy Father. In his words from the balcony of St Peter's Basilica in 2013 on his election, Pope Francis told the packed square below, "You all know that the duty of the conclave was to give a Bishop of Rome. It seems that my brother cardinals have come almost to the ends of the earth to get him." Born, as we have heard, in Buenos Aires, Pope Francis was the first non-European pope of modern times, and there had not been another one for some since the year 741. And he was a radical pontiff. He railed against what he termed the pathology of power, and those in the church who, he said, feel themselves lord of the manor, superior to everyone and to everything. Instead, he urged his church to come out of herself and go to the peripheries. His vision was a church of the poor and for the poor. Over the next decade, he put front and centre traditional Franciscan themes, which above all valued humility, compassion and solidarity with the poor. He was determined to favour that humility over grandeur. After greeting the crowds on the day he was elected, the new Pope shunned the papal limousine and decided instead to share the coach that was taking his brother cardinals home. Throughout his time as Pope, he stayed true to those values of simplicity and became known for it, becoming the first Pope who lived not in the Vatican's apostolic palace, but in the modern block next door, which had been built as a guest house. Pope Francis always sought to foster peace where there had been conflict. He worked to heal the rift that had existed with the Eastern Orthodox Church for over 1,000 years. He worked with Lutherans, Methodists and Anglicans and persuaded the Israeli and Palestinian presidents to join him to pray for peace. After attacks by Muslim militants, he said it was not right to identify Islam with violence. He said at the time, "If I speak of Islamic violence, then I have to speak of Catholic violence too." He was clearly guided by the prayer of St Francis of Assisi, "Where there is hatred, let me sow love." A great internationalism and concern for the natural environment featured throughout his papacy. He appointed more than 140 cardinals from non-European countries and passes on a church that has a more global outlook than when he was first elected. Today, we acknowledge the profound loss that a great many people across Scotland and indeed our world feel today. Presiding Officer, on the mace before us that rests in our well are inscribed the words so familiar to all of us in this chamber: wisdom, integrity, justice and compassion. Each of those words define the papacy of Pope Francis. So, as we reflect today, let us commit to standing up for what is right, for caring for others and holding on to the values that Pope Francis sought to embody. May the Lord bless him. May the Lord keep him. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that motion 17250 in the name of John Swinney on motion of condolence be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed, and I will now allow a short period of suspension until 2:30 p.m. Thank you.